welcome to Real Economy. I'm Maitreyi Sitharaman. This week we are in Madrid, talking about Europe's youth unemployment crisis and the potential solutions being created at the grassroots by people like you and I. On the show today, we analyze France's youth employment initiatives and take a look at Spain's entrepreneurial drive to change the way the next generation works. We then break down the EU's initiatives with Commissioner for Employment, Laszlo Andor. Greece and Spain have consistently made headlines for their record levels of youth unemployment in Europe. Compare their numbers with those of Austria and Germany, and you can really understand this intense focus on southern Europe's lost generation. Spain's young people, especially in southern regions like Andalusia, are really struggling to envision a future. Skills mismatch and a lack of entrepreneurial opportunities are often cited, but we ask, can there be hope?
Igor Llorente back from meeting a consortium of investors, Spanish and international. Igor is a happy man. He has almost tied up the funds for his first entrepreneurial venture, a mobile commerce app called Sivarit.
I think they really want to invest, and soon, like in 1 month, we will sign the contract.
Igor's entrepreneurial story is not common in Spain. Public and private jobs are being slashed, so an austere government is pushing the young to go it alone.
We're combining that with this necessary rationalisation process with new incentives, a flat rate on social security contributions, the ability to make compatible the unemployment benefit, the promotion of business angels and foreign investors.
But those who work at the grassroots with the unemployed say it is just not enough.
These programmes are not enough. They don't reach all of society. These plans really need the means and resources to actually be implemented.
Those allocated resources add up to 3.4 billion, with 1.9 billion coming from the EU's €6 billion programme. But the entrepreneurial organisations say it's the lack of credit and experience that Spain needs to address immediately.
We are working in Spain with private companies like JP Morgan or Accenture to develop a mechanism for financing for young entrepreneurs. We're also working to start a mentoring program.
Spain is under pressure to remove the minimum wage after it pushed through a labour reform bill. But none of the programmes, whether addressing labour laws or entrepreneurship, actually creates jobs.
Spain has a very special situation which it shares with Greece and Italy and Portugal, where youth unemployment is high, which is that it has what we call a dual labor market. That means that people either have a permanent contract, which means they're very expensive and difficult to fire, and then you have this outer layer of workers who come in and out. They're the first ones to lose their jobs, and that's where the young people are.
We had a very rigid legislation that stopped the labor market to adapt rapidly to that structural change and to the effects of the crisis.
Currently shrinking, Spain's economy needs at least 0.81% growth to create jobs. Until then, young people like Igor, who go it alone, need to buckle up to fly into a future of their own making.
But before we go any further, here's Real Economy's crash course. What is youth unemployment?
When A, B and C reach their 15th birthday, they enter the labour market and are classified as youth till their 24th birthday. A gets a job, B doesn't have a job but is looking for one, and C is called a NEET because he is not in employment, education or training. Youth unemployment covers B and C. In the short term, lack of labour market demand causes youth unemployment. This is when businesses and governments cannot make decisions due to economic uncertainty, labour laws and taxation. Over the long term, a major cause of youth unemployment is the lack of skills or a skills mismatch. Youth unemployment rate is then calculated as a percentage of B plus C compared to the total youth labour force, which is the sum of A, B and C and everyone like them. But many young people are outside the labour force as they are studying and not available for work. Youth unemployment rates are therefore higher than overall unemployment rates.
So, can apprenticeships and encouraging entrepreneurship really create jobs in an environment where businesses are so uncertain about the future? We put that question to EU Commissioner for Employment and Social Affairs, Laszlo Andor, at the EU inauguration of their apprenticeship initiative in Leipzig, Germany. Commissioner Andor, thanks very much for joining us. It's very appropriate that we're here in Leipzig, only because apprenticeships are being raised now as an option for youth unemployment. Is this really the way to create jobs?
The rise of youth unemployment in the recession years has been much steeper than the rise of general unemployment. But it is true that in order to address the systemic problems, of course we have to generate a recovery, we have to generate economic growth, and that requires more complex measures.
How does the Youth Guarantee Scheme actually work? Because we heard about the big numbers, 6 billion, maybe going to 8 billion, but no one really truly knows how it's dispersed, how it's implemented.
The Youth Guarantee ensures that no young people can be unemployed for more than 4 months after leaving school or becoming unemployed, because there is an offer from the public employment services for a new job or a learning opportunity or an apprenticeship or a traineeship.
Do you find that's the case when you're talking to national governments, that they are on board?
There is a great enthusiasm for the transfer of this.
Enthusiasm, a little different from implementability.
But it has to start with the enthusiasm, because the countries will remain diverse. In some countries there will be a greater element of training, in others entrepreneurship.
There's a lot of question about mobility in itself, and that raises a lot of thorns when you bring it up in the EU.
Well, it is true, it is sensitive, but I believe we have to speak about it. Because in some regions there is a very high level of unemployment, while in other regions, many parts of Germany, there are shortages of labor. There is a big demand from the side of the businesses, so we have to match better supply and demand.
Do you think in some ways more resources need to be deployed?
Well, definitely at the crisis time there is a need for more funding. That's why it's very important that a front-loading will happen with the €6 billion instrument. It will be concentrated on the first 2 years, 2014 and 2015, and then it can also be supplemented if it's not enough at the end.
From Germany to France, where 1 in 4 young people is out of a job. 300,000 of them will be targeted by the EU's €6 billion fund, some of which has been earmarked for France over the next 2 years. Our very own Sébastien Lebilzic has been analysing the French initiatives.
Kevin spent a year unemployed before he got this job. But he is never alone. At his side permanently is Lionel, 60 years old, with 42 years of experience.
Do I have to use blocks or can I use my hands?
No, it's possible to hold it in your hand.
This SME, specialising in precision optics, is the first in France to have benefited from the generation contract.
The young person will work with the older one, who pass on all their experience. The financial aspect of the generation contract consists of a grant of €4,000, €2,000 for the senior person and €2,000 for the junior, and that's for 3 years, which helps towards the cost of training, which is expensive.
It is because of this support that the company was able to hire and make the transition between the 2 generations. This contract is one of the key measures of the French government.
We cannot just wait for growth. If we just wait for growth, then the number of people out of work will increase. That's not acceptable. So we have to act and create growth and employment in depth. At the same time, we have to work within an emergency to support economically and socially the young.
The goal is to reach 300,000 new positions through these subsidised jobs, and to sign 75,000 generation contracts, and to have 500,000 new apprentices by the year 2017.
Let's share our best practices, which will help us to improve our national politics and benefit European solidarity and the capacity within the European budget. That capacity is missing within our own budgets, as they are under constraints.
The objective of the French government is to reverse the trend in unemployment by the end of the year. 600 million will be invested over 2 years. Only areas with more than a quarter of young unemployment can benefit from such aid. That's the case in Languedoc-Roussillon in the south of France, where the rate of youth unemployment stands at 38.3%. Jean Darnes founded his company making electric vehicles here. At 26, with help from Europe and the region, he already employs 4 people. His company is owned by a cooperative, funded 25% by European funds.
There are still quite a number of public initiatives, and a lot of places are very welcoming and offer a lot of things to help young entrepreneurs. We must learn to use them. That's how we get to create a climate of trust.
In France, 1/3 of the projects supported by the European Social Fund involve people under 30. Almost 900,000 young people were involved in 2012. That'll give a boost to the fight against unemployment.
Considering the tight credit conditions in southern Europe, even if the spreads have narrowed, do you see the issues for youth and youth unemployment continuing for the next 1 or 2 years?
The Eurozone crisis is not yet over, and this makes an impact on the labour market conditions in mainly the southern or more peripheral countries, and this applies to the private sector and the public sector too. In the private sector we have the so-called financial fragmentation, which means that the interest rates are higher in the more peripheral countries, but because of the CDS spreads there is a negative impact, a disadvantage for the public sector finances as well. So without addressing this division, this polarization in the European Union, we only have a very limited room to address these critical issues.
Commissioner Andor, thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much.